You stand in the silence of an American junkyard, not just any junkyard, this is the cemetery of dreams, 1,000 metallic visions that died for reasons of money, poor design, or lack of nerve, but in the corner, shrouded in dust and decades of rust, lies the ghost of a single design that, had it been built, would have changed everything. It would have driven the future, but it might have poisoned the pavement beneath its wheels. This is the story of a car that promised the moon, the Ford Nucleon. Imagine, a car that never needed gas. A single charge would take you 5,000 miles, running purely on the harnessed power of the atom. The year was 1957, the atomic age was booming, and nuclear power was seen as the limitless cure for all of humanity's problems. We built nuclear submarines, nuclear power plants, and we envisioned nuclear planes. Naturally, the next stop was the suburban garage. Ford wasn't merely dreaming of a hybrid engine, they were proposing a full-fledged, working, compact fission reactor replacing the traditional internal combustion engine. It was utopian thinking, engineering bravado, and a staggering display of Cold War optimism all wrapped into one sleek, futuristic vehicle. They called it the ultimate expression of personal freedom. The design was audacious, a passenger cab pushed far forward for safety, and dominating the rear axle, a huge, shielded cylinder housing a small, replaceable uranium core. The idea was simple, yet terrifyingly elegant. Fission creates heat, heat creates steam, steam drives a turbine, the turbine drives the wheels, your daily commute, powered by the same force that lit up cities. But history is littered with brilliant ideas killed by a single, unmovable truth. The men who designed the Nucleon were optimists, blinded by the silver gleam of a promised future. They saw the solution to oil dependency. They ignored the one, silent passenger riding in the back seat. Catastrophic, invisible, lethal radiation. The world never drove the Nucleon. It remained a 2-foot-long model in a museum. We know the official story. It was too expensive, but that is the easy answer. To understand why this car was truly never built, we must first travel back to the forgotten laboratories of the 1950s and discover what the dreamers at Ford overlooked. They solved the problem of power, but they created a threat far bigger than any gasoline explosion, and the secret lay not in the engine, but in the material they chose for the shielding. The Nucleon wasn't born from an engineer's idle sketch. It was a child of American anxieties in the mid-50s. Oil prices were volatile, and dependence on Middle Eastern oil was a strategic nightmare. More importantly, the Soviet Union was launching Sputnik. The United States needed a technological answer, a visible, awe-inspiring display of American scientific superiority. The civilian application of nuclear power became that answer. The concept came from Ford's Advanced Styling Studio, a kind of internal think tank. The lead designers, like Alex Tremulous, who also worked on the Tucker torpedo, weren't just stylists, they were futurists. They were given a near-impossible brief: design a car for the year 2000, unconstrained by conventional energy. The Nucleon wasn't supposed to be practical, it was supposed to be a statement. Tremulous and his team genuinely believed in the safety of nuclear miniaturization. They imagined that within a decade, reactors would be so small and safe they could be dropped into the back of a station wagon. The genius of the Nucleon was its replaceable core concept. Instead of refueling, you would drive to your local atomic service station, and specialized robotic arms would lift out the spent core, which, by the way, was still intensely radioactive, and drop in a fresh one. A minute later, you're back on the road for another 5,000 miles. This was the ultimate expression of convenience. The public reaction was rapturous. Magazine covers hailed the atomic car as the end of the gas station era. The press photos showed clean, white-gloved attendants servicing the rear unit, smiling. No one was smiling about the potential costs, nor about the 70-ton weight problem of a truly safe reactor. The sheer weight of lead and concrete required to contain a fission reaction safely would have rendered the car immobile, but Ford had a secret hope. They were betting on an entirely new material to solve the shielding problem. they anticipated a breakthrough in lightweight shielding that never materialized. Without it, the Nucleon couldn't be built. Ford knew the Nucleon needed a miracle material to fly, but even if they had found it, they missed the biggest danger of all. It wasn't the weight, nor the cost of uranium. The real terror of the Ford Nucleon lay in the simple, everyday act of a minor fender bender. The dream of infinite driving hinges on a device called the small fission reactor, SFR, inside the Nucleon's rear cylinder. A tiny bundle of enriched uranium rods would be bathed in a coolant, likely liquid sodium. When neutrons split the uranium atoms, the chain reaction generates massive heat. This heat boils water in a secondary, isolated loop, creating steam that turns the drive shaft. Crucially, the reactor core itself never touches the drive loop. The problem wasn't creating the power. Scientists in the 50s could do that. The problem was moderation and shielding. For a reactor to be safe and efficient, you need a moderator to slow down the neutrons and a dense, heavy barrier to stop the gamma rays and secondary radiation. On a submarine or a power plant, you use feet of steel, lead, and concrete. The Nucleon had only a few feet of space. Ford's engineers optimistically estimated the entire unit would weigh maybe 500 pounds, a figure mocked by every nuclear physicist of the era. To achieve even marginal safety, the rear unit alone would have exceeded the weight of a typical Ford sedan of the day. The Nucleon would have needed a chassis so massive that it would never fit on a standard road and would consume roads and bridges. But let's assume they built a safe, powerful reactor small enough to fit. Now we face the most nightmarish flaw: accidents. Imagine a rear-end collision on a highway. A minor impact compromises the shielding. The core remains hot and dangerous, but now its protective shell is cracked. Even worse, the collision could breach the coolant system, leading to a core meltdown. Not in an isolated desert test site, but in a busy intersection. The resulting radioactive plume would make the surrounding miles uninhabitable for decades. The Nucleon wasn't just a car, it was a mobile nuclear dirty bomb waiting for an unfortunate driver. The physicists at the Atomic Energy Commission were quietly horrified by the Nucleon. They knew it was fundamentally unsound, yet, the public loved the idea. Fueled by Cold War propaganda, the dream was dying not in the lab, but in the boardroom, where the engineers were forced to confront a danger they couldn't control. The public's perception of risk and a very different kind of explosion. The explosion of liability. The reality of the Nucleon was a series of compounding, insurmountable hurdles. 1. Fuel and economics. At the time, highly enriched uranium was strictly controlled by the government for military use. Getting permission, and paying for, thousands of tiny, individual cores for consumer use was politically and economically impossible. 2. The maintenance nightmare. The idea of robotic core replacement was fantastic, but the logistics of handling thousands of intensely radioactive, spent cores was a vast, unfeasible infrastructure project that would have bankrupted entire states. 3. The cost of safety. The actual projected cost of a single, even marginally safe Nucleon was estimated at over $1 million in 1957 money, making it cheaper to buy a fleet of dozens of conventional cars. But the true final nail in the coffin was the liability. Ford's legal team realized that if a single Nucleon was involved in an accident that released radiation, the resulting lawsuits could destroy the entire company overnight. They were betting the company on a physics breakthrough that was nowhere in sight, with a risk that no insurance company in the world would touch. In the early 1960s, the official narrative shifted. Ford quietly shelved the project, stating that the technology was simply too far ahead of its time. This was a carefully curated truth. The real reason was that the business model for catastrophe was impossible. They couldn't price the risk. The Cold War optimism about nuclear safety was replaced by the stark reality of environmental and human disaster. Thanks to early warnings from nuclear tests and accidents, the Nucleon became a footnote, a beautiful, deadly concept that was swept under the rug as the atomic age gave way to the space age. Ford thought they were moving on, but the shadow of. The Nucleon did not disappear entirely. The lessons learned from its catastrophic impossibility subtly shaped entire industries, from how we manage modern battery waste to the design of every single electric vehicle you see on the road today. The Nucleon's greatest legacy is not what it failed to build, but what it taught us about what we must shield. The Ford Nucleon is dead, but its ghost lives on in every modern debate about energy and transport. We are currently undergoing a similar revolution with electric vehicles (EVs). Just as the Nucleon promised infinite driving, modern EVs promise zero emissions, yet, both face common challenges: battery, or core, disposal, sourcing of specialized materials, and infrastructure scalability. The key difference is the nature of the shield. The Nucleon demanded a shield against instantaneous, catastrophic radiation. Modern EVs demand a shield against the long-term, diffuse pollution and the ethics of material sourcing, but the core lesson remains: the easiest part is the invention, the hardest part is the safe, scalable, and ethical disposal of the power source. The Nucleon was a monument to technological arrogance. The belief that sheer engineering could overcome fundamental physics and societal risk. It serves as a potent reminder that the best engineers are not those who can create the biggest explosion, but those who understand where the line between innovation and utter irresponsibility must be drawn. It was a beautiful, deadly vision that had to die so that the rest of us could drive safely into the actual future. The Nucleon story asks a terrifying question. If you were an engineer in 1957, would you have pushed the button to approve the first test drive, knowing the true risk? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This was never built, and we'll see you next time as we dive deep into another lost future.